On July 13th, 1977, exactly 45 years ago today, a major blackout hit New York City. For 25 hours, the darkness led to total chaos with widespread looting and fires in the streets. It happened at a time when the city was already in a financial crisis with high unemployment rates, and there was also a serial killer on the loose. Let's take a look back at this moment in New York City history. CBS 2's Jenson and Tesh lead our coverage of the 1977 blackout.
New York prepares for another night as Mayor Beam asks for state troopers and a National Guard standby, and recriminations fly over what caused the blackout of '77.
Channel 2 News. The 6 o'clock report with Jim Jenson and Tesh sitting in for Rollin Smith. Here again is Jim Jenson.
Good evening. For most New Yorkers in most parts of the city, it was a day of being powerless, and what began as a crack of thunder, a flash of lightning in the skies above northern Westchester County and put out the lights for millions of us, now has officials from New York City Hall to the White House asking why and how it all happened again. Mayor Beam has sent a request to Albany. He wants state troopers sent to New York City to assist authorities there. A little later on in this broadcast, we'll have a live report from Bill Greenwood, who is at the mayor's command post at police headquarters. We now have this videotape portion, however, of some of the remarks made by Mayor Beam earlier today.
I want to express first my total outrage that at this hour, the city of New York is still without power, and the prospects for restoration of full electrical service remain vague as far as Con Ed is concerned. And given what occurred 12 years ago, Con Ed's performance is at the very least gross negligence, and at the worst far more serious. Early this morning, I had requested the Federal Power Commission to conduct investigations to determine why this city has been so devastated by a blackout, which seemingly was never to occur again, according to Con Ed. We've seen our citizens subjected to violence, vandalism, theft, and discomfort. The blackout has threatened our safety and has seriously impacted our economy. We've been needlessly subjected to a night of terror in many communities that have been wantonly looted and burned. The cost, when finally tallied, will be enormous. I believe the seriousness of this blackout requires special investigation by the city itself. And accordingly, I've established a special board of inquiry, which will have full powers of subpoena and will be authorized to conduct an in-depth investigation into all of the aspects of this power failure and its impact upon the people of this city. Within the hour, I expect to meet with the co-chairman of this board and will announce more details as to their mission. I believe the people of this city must be assured that this must never happen again.
Summing up some of what Mayor Beam wants in his news conference that he announced this afternoon, he wants 250 state troopers to come into this area. That has been confirmed from Governor Hugh Carey. Governor Carey said those troopers should arrive sometime soon. He also wants some federal support in the form of other troops. That has not yet been confirmed. Also, Mayor Beam has come up with a 3-member panel which will be investigating this blackout. Those among other demands that Mayor Beam made today at a news conference. Jim?
We should point out that even though Mayor Beam made a scathing attack against Con Edison, the chairman of Con Edison's board, Charles Luce, was very laudatory of Mayor Beam and his leadership he has exercised throughout the blackout. Now, why did it happen and will it happen again? Nobody who's lived through this experience can help but ask just those two questions, and today Con Ed Chairman Charles Luce had an opportunity to answer them. Marilyn Salinger's at the utilities headquarters with this live report. Marilyn.
Well, Jim, it seems that everybody's going to be conducting investigations into the whys and why-nots of the blackout, including Con Ed's executive director, Charles Lewis. Just a short time ago, he held a news conference here at their executive offices on the 19th floor. He said at that time that resumption of full power had taken so long because New York City, unlike many other major cities, has an underground power system, which Lewis said was supposed to be much better. But the number one question on everybody's minds this afternoon was when will that system be totally operative once again?
As of the present time, we think that restoration should be substantially completed throughout the city by midnight. Now, we've made these various predictions, some of which Mayor Beam referred to, and the calls that I made to him last night and that he made to me, where we've been asked, as we were trying this restoration procedure, or trying to push it forward, when are you going to get through? When will it all be through? We've had the choice of saying we have no idea or making an educated guess on the best information we had at the time. We chose the latter because we thought people were entitled to know the best educated guess that we could give as to the time of restoration, and that's what I'm giving you now. And protective.
I then asked Mr. Lewis to comment on Mayor Beam's charge earlier today of gross negligence on the part of Con Edison concerning their responsibility to the citizens of New York.
Our machines were protected last night. In the first blackout, our machines didn't have the protection to keep them lubricated as they rolled down. We had that last night, and as a result, we had no major or consequential machine damage. So I just think respectfully, I think he's wrong about that.
Mr. Lewis, if I can ask you, please, the mayor has also made reference to the fact that Con Edison needlessly subjected the people of New York City to a night of terror. Who, in fact, do you feel should be responsible, number one, for what went on in the city last night and the costs that the city will now have to spend while the power is out in the city?
Well, I don't think it's fair to the men and women at Con Edison to imply, I don't think the mayor said it, although some might imply from what he said or infer from what he said, that the Con Edison people were responsible for the looting that took place last night. That is most unfortunate. It's something that every New Yorker is very concerned about. But that is not a function of Consolidated Edison to police the streets. So if there's an implication that somehow that's our fault, I just can't buy it.
Well, Mr. Lewis also admitted that there would be probably, as he remembered from the last blackout, a lot of litigation pending against Con Edison, something that he wasn't looking forward to. There was still a lot of unanswered questions after the news conference today. Lewis denied that he had ever said that New York would never have another blackout. He said that nobody can ever say never about a blackout. And on that hopeful note, we'll go back to you, Jim.
Well, we have now, to the best of our ability, put together the power picture as it exists right now. As far as we know at this moment, power has been restored totally in Westchester County and in Staten Island. Now, nearly 100% of the power has been restored right now in all of Brooklyn and Queens. The Bronx, however, is only 40%. No, check that. The Bronx is now 60% restored. In Manhattan, 50% of the communities are out in Manhattan. They include Yorkville, south to Wall Street, including Turtle Bay, Kips Bay, Beekman Terrace, Sutton Place, Gramercy Park, the Lower East Side, and Wall Street. Those are the communities in Manhattan currently sans power. On the west side, with no power, below Chelsea, including Greenwich Village and Soho. That's the information we have right now. And here and there, of course, even in those areas that are reporting 100% restoration, I would imagine there are isolated instances of no power, but I'm sure those situations will be corrected shortly. John?
And Jim, the latest information I'm getting is that Con Ed says that perhaps they will have all of the power restored by midnight or maybe 12:30. In part of Brooklyn today, the scene was a chaotic offshoot of last night. It was a combination of fire plus looting that sent 4 firemen to a hospital with serious injuries. Chris Morgan was there.
It was a raging 3-alarmer that raced through a Bushwick furniture warehouse and the clothing store next door. A blaze that firemen said was deliberately set, and one that threatened to burn down a whole city block. Police said it was step 1 of the looters' master design, a flaming diversion to draw police and firemen to the scene so the looters would be free to operate elsewhere. For thousands of local residents, the area under the aging Broadway L suddenly became a carnival, a place where surging crowds shuttled from store to store, looting as they went. But for businessman Irving Feltman, it was a tragedy.
25 years I've been in business. I got wiped out in one day. The cops were standing in front of the store this morning with me. At least 30 policemen there just taking out the stuff, all the furniture, just standing there. They couldn't do a thing about it. Just send out the National Guard to show tear gas, protect every individual. What are we paying taxes for? What's going on? Wiped out after 25 years.
Yeah? 25 years, 25 years. I like that speech, my friend.
Only a small percentage of the onlookers actually participated in the looting, but many others, mostly young people, literally cheered the looters on.
Well, don't you realize you're ripping off and burning down your own community?
Yo, this is something, you know, everybody got to do, you know, because of the situation, man. Situations like that, man. Ain't no man to say nothing like that.
Yeah, well, look, you're burning buildings that everyone lives in. You're burning homes. Why?
The man will not a home. Then a home now, it's no explanation for now. You know, that's just stupidity. But the stores, I can dig that now. Hey, you know.
Yeah.
That's
have you ripped up anything yourself?
Nah, baby. I'm just walking and looking.
And looking.
When my time come, hey.
As the looting reached its height, one group of marauders headed for the Bushwick Community Health Center, but were confronted by 3 members of the board, each armed with a club.
In effect, you're guarding your center.
We're guarding our own center.
Is this what you feel you have to do, stand here with a club in your hand to guard this door?
At this particular moment, I find that there's a need for such, and I think it will help the situation.
The board members said they had stood guard since last night and would continue to do so until the disturbances end. Miles away on Manhattan's Upper West Side, the debris-filled streets teemed with people, when unlike the chaotic Bushwick section of Brooklyn, there was no reported daylight looting. Beefed-up patrols from the 24th Precinct kept a tight rein on the neighborhood. At the precinct itself, where all leaves and vacations were canceled and all offices were working 12-hour tours, Lieutenant David Velez ruefully cited some shocking statistics that reflected the scope of last night's violence.
There were 138 arrests made approximately, and we suffered damage to approximately 50 stores, mostly on Broadway between 86 and 110, where our business community is. And some of the stores were it's from slight to heavy damage on some of the stores.
One of the stores hardest hit on Amsterdam Avenue, a hardware store owned by Leonard Altman.
They broke 2 windows, they emptied the windows out completely. And there's a lot of things that can't be replaced. There's a lot of damage on the inside. The frames are all broken. They'll have to be repaired.
Have you any idea as to the cost, a ballpark figure?
At this point, I can't tell you. I have no idea. I haven't sat down to figure out what was in it, and I can't tell you exactly what was gone.
But compared to Le Mans Boutique, the damage at Altman's was minor. Rampaging looters literally devastated the chic 3-level men's shop that catered mainly to the area's well-heeled business and professional men. Somehow, they did manage to overlook a penny in the cash register, deliberately perhaps. But owner Kenneth Morgan says they took just about everything else.
How bad a loss is this?
Well, did you hear the lady? She said it was unbelievable, which it is. The loss is total. I think there is 1 shoe left in the store, and it was fully stocked. The furniture and fixtures, most of them are gone, are broken.
Do you think you could ever start up again?
That's what I was thinking about, and I think that we will. Yeah.
For Morgan, that reopening date is a long way off. But what about the dozens of other neighborhood merchants who plan to do business tomorrow? What precautions can they take tonight? Lieutenant Velez provided some tips.
Most of them will do whatever they can to secure the place with plywood and other procedures, and if they call us and let us know that they're vulnerable again, we'll keep special eyes, on them tonight. There'll be special patrols, and we'll pay special attention to these areas in which, they may continue to be looting.
With the return of even partial electrical power, police say the situation will return to near normal. And with those beefed-up police patrols and state police reserves called into the city, the officials believe the message is clear. The end of violence is upon us.
Jim?
Chris, do you know when those state troopers are to arrive? Do we have time?
No idea. They're pulled into reserve. They should be in the New York barracks, which is to say at the Twin Towers sometimes this afternoon. As to whether or not they will in fact be called out tonight, they're just being held in reserves. They're available.
I've just been told, Chris, it looks as though about 6:30 they'll be arriving in the city.
That's right, and they will go to the police reserve barracks headquarters in the World Trade Center and remain there until called by any precinct.
Now, New York City's court system was handcuffed with catch-22 problems today. Police rounded up thousands of looters, lawbreakers, but most courts were shut tight. And even at the Bronx Criminal Court, the backlog of arraignments created a jam-up. Police, for a time, were not even able to process fingerprints because the computers were powerless. But Mayor Bean says the vandals will be punished no matter how long it takes. John?
How does the city look right now? Well, Vic Miles is up in a helicopter now with our live minicam. And Vic, we're hearing reports that there is looting that is continuing at this hour. Are you seeing any of that?
Well, not so much evidence of looting, John, but surely evidence of last night's mischief and evidence that Brooklyn's firemen have their hands full. Even as we were hovering, waiting to make our report, a brand new hot fire broke out just below us. I'm told it's located in the East New York section on Eastern Parkway Extension and Stone Avenue. And this is the type of thing that's been happening in Brooklyn all day, I'm told, by pilots who have been crisscrossing the area, going about their various duties. The police try to cordon off the areas, but they don't seem to be able to do too much about it. The fires just keep cropping up. Right now, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 fires from where I am, about 800 feet off the ground in East New York. The same picture exists in the Brownsville area of Brooklyn, where you have abandoned buildings apparently put to the torch and evidence of looting just around the corner in a commercial district. This one seems to be going pretty good, Jim. It's been going for quite a while.
Hear me? Vic, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
What was it like over West Manhattan and the Bronx? Were you over those areas?
Yes, I was over West Manhattan. I haven't been up as far as the Bronx yet, but I'm told we don't have, maybe might not have as many fires up there, but there's certainly lots of debris in the street and evidence that last night's power outage certainly inspired a lot of mischief, an awful lot of mischief. When you're up this high, you can get it in perspective, and it's just devastating what's happened and what apparently continues to happen. As I say, we have brand new fires, or at least one brand new fire popping out just in the last 10 minutes or so.
Thank you, Vic. We'll be checking with you later on.
Okie doke.
And as we continue our coverage of the blackout of '77, we'll run down a report on what services are and are not available to you right now. Health and Science Editor Charles Crawford will tell you what caused all of this, and we'll look back at another blackout that night in November of '65 when the 6 o'clock report continues. All city firemen were ordered to report back to duty during the emergency, and they had their work cut out for them. You just saw a report from Vic Miles, a new fire in Brooklyn. The fires included a spectacular one-alarmer on the Upper West Side, long vacant nursing home. Acting Fire Commissioner Stephen Murphy says 1,500 alarms came in between 9:30 last night and 6:30 this morning. Only 400 of them were actual fires, and just 40 of those were serious. And there was one casualty. A 2-month-old baby was found dead on the stairway of a burning building in Brooklyn. John.
And Jim, while those firemen were out chasing false alarms, police had their hands full with looters.
Over here we heard about 5 or 10 shots, and the police pulled up, and the crowd scatters, and then it gathers and it scatters again.
Hey, you heard the other shot?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So it's pretty wild.
Right, are the police are incapable of handling it, do you think?
Seems like it, you know. It's pretty wild out here.
Right. Have you called anybody?
No. What's the use?
Come here, go, let me get some. Where'd you get that from? Where'd you get that from? There's more stuff in here. Where'd you get that from? Come here, where'd you get it from? There's more stuff.
Has it been happening like this all night?
Yes. Hectic. Hectic, unbelievable.
How many men have you been arresting?
I would say roughly somewhere between 70 and 100.
So far tonight?
And we've counted.
What mostly is happening on the streets?
It's Christmas. Help yourself. Santa Claus has come to the Upper West Side.
That scene on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and in sections of Brooklyn, a similar scene.
They're looting everywhere.
What about gunfire? We've heard reports of gunfire.
There have been reports of gunfire in various precincts. We had I don't know, it's only unofficial, but we had cars pinned down.
You had police cars pinned down?
And so we heard.
Where was that?
In the 2-6 precinct. We had shots fired in the 8-4. There were shots fired in the 7-8. It's everything, looting, sniping, the whole bit. Everybody's going crazy.
Can you tell us what you're doing here in the window?
Trying to keep the store together, what's left.
People break in already?
Yes. The store is looted.
What kind of losses did you have?
Maximum.
Maximum?
Yes.
And you're armed?
Yes, I am.
And have you had any trouble since you came out here with your gun?
Yes.
What kind?
All night long, there have been shots along this block.
There was not much police could do to stop the looting. That's a burning police car you're seeing there. There were arrests made, though, almost 3,000 of them. But before those arrests could be made, the vandals managed to rip protective iron grates from their hinges. Food, clothing, shoes, magazines, and furniture littered the streets. People scattered in all directions, carrying loot with them. Burglar alarms just blocks from precinct houses rang unanswered. The looters carried laundry bags, filled grocery carts, loaded car trunks. They made their escapes on foot, by bicycle, and in cars. The arrest, as I said, almost 3,000 of them, taxed police facilities severely. That prompted Police Commissioner Michael Codd to order the opening of the Tombs, a cavernous old jail in Lower Manhattan ordered closed by a federal judge 3 years ago. Early this morning, I asked the commissioner about this situation. How many do you think will be going into that area? We just came from that area. There seem to be at least 100 or 200.
There will probably be 300, 400, perhaps even 500 held there.
Todd, how does this rate in terms of the size of arrests? Is this the largest single number of arrests the city has seen in recent years?
If it isn't, it's among the heaviest.
And when the sun came up this morning, the looters and the vandals were still emerging from the buses and the police vans that were queued up at the doors to the Tombs. Jim?
Did any of those men who were arrested make any comments to you at all when you were filming? What were they saying?
Yes, as a matter of fact, they seemed to be very surprised. They were very hurt.
Being arrested?
Yes, they were very hurt that the people that were with them, that were doing the same thing, were not being arrested. They couldn't believe it. They were doing what everybody else was doing. They felt that they shouldn't be arrested.
And the story of the day could almost take its name from Washington Irving, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. To balance it out against all the pictures you've seen of looting and burning, New York, for the most part, was a peaceful city today. Many of its citizens taking the day off in the usual hustle and bustle. Cars, the few of them which were out, move freely on the roadways. But those who tried to get into or out of Manhattan by way of the East Side tunnels found the route blocked. The Tri-Borough Authority will be at work through the evening to restart the ventilating systems and should have them all in working order by tomorrow. The subway trains, which have been lined up in the yards like so many lengths of pipe, are now beginning to move, albeit just a little. But the MTA says it'll not be until 7:30 tonight, about an hour from now, before normal service can be restored. The Mets were losing to the Cubs last night by the score of 2-1 when the game was called. All the fans there were escorted out safely, and this afternoon's game was also postponed out at Shea. Now on the rails, Conrail reports its Hudson, Harlem, and New Haven lines will not be running tonight. No service on the Hudson, Harlem, and New Haven lines. But service is going to resume tomorrow morning on a limited basis. All trains into Manhattan will, however, make a stop at 125th Street. The Long Island Railroad restored service on a limited basis just an hour ago. The blackout did strand 14 Long Island Railroad trains and 16 Conrail trains, but all the passengers happily were reported to have been evacuated safely. New York City buses have been in service throughout the blackout. They'll continue to run. The reason for that, the buses hold 85 gallons of fuel, and they refueled last night just prior to the blackout. The vehicles, you see, can run 48 hours without having to make another stop for fuel. In addition, another transportation note, Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark airports are all open and they are operating. Now, the power outage also brought New York's important financial community to a screeching halt. Governor Carey ordered all the banks to close, and the New York and the American stock exchanges also closed down. Now, back to where it all began and how it began. Con Ed says it was a freak of nature which left this city and Westchester County in the dark. Health and Science Editor Charles Crawford recounts the events which snuffed out the lights. Charles?
Jim, it took only a few seconds to trigger the events that led to New York's most massive power failure since 1965. Here's what authorities think happened.
8:25 p.m. A series of powerful lightning bolts in the 500,000 volt range strike several transmission lines in Westchester County. An instantaneous power surge begins. 8:30. Some power is interrupted as protective circuit breakers automatically begin opening. 8:37. Equipment at Indian Point No. 3 nuclear power plant detects the overload, and the plant is separated from the system. 8:40. A major north-south feeder line from Indian Point to New York City is now dead. Efforts are underway to try to save the spreading power failure. 8:45 to 9:15 p.m. First, voltage is cut by 5% in the power going out to Con Ed customers, but it doesn't work. Then an 8% voltage reduction, but again, the demand is still too great. Next comes load shedding, Con Ed's term for what amounts to pulling the switch on some customers, again in an effort to save the rest of the system. Elmsford, Yonkers, and Mount Vernon are blacked out. Even help from Long Island and neighboring New Jersey power companies can't stop the disastrous loss of power.
We helped Con Edison as long as we could. As a matter of fact, the final, we did not cut them off. Their piece of equipment failed in over there, which took out the last, as I understand it, the last remaining transmission line between us and them.
It was here at the Ravenswood Plant No. 3, home of the famous Big Alice generator, also involved in the 1965 blackout, that again last night, everything finally came crashing down. Despite voltage cutbacks and selected shutdowns, the cascading power failure couldn't be halted. The demand kept building until the generators here simply couldn't handle the load. The result, a shutdown that quickly spread throughout the entire system.
But in this instance, though we had a 50% capability for automatic load shedding, the initial outages with the lightning strikes knocked out 15% of that capability. That is, 15% of the load that we would shed with automatic load shedding was shed by the lightning storm in North Westchester. The remaining 35% was simply not enough to handle the loss of the remaining ties and the loss of Ravenswood 3. And so our system went down with a crash.
So again, it all started up here in northwest Westchester County with a series of lightning strikes hitting major transmission lines. First went the Indian Point Power Plant No. 3. That cut power to this major feeder line, north-south feeder line into New York. Now with voltage cuts, selected voltage cuts, and blackouts in selected areas around the area, and even power brought in from Long Island, and additional power brought in all the way from New Jersey, all of these measures failed. And at 9:34 last night, the blackout had spread across Westchester and all 5 boroughs of New York City. So tonight, not only are power officials unsure exactly why the entire system shut down, but neither can they say with absolute certainty that it won't happen again. Getting the answers to those questions will take days, perhaps weeks, and already have prompted investigations from here in New York all the way to the federal government in Washington, D.C. Jim?
Charles, to the best of your knowledge, had we been tied into the old grid system of 1965 when we had the whole Northeast blackout, would the whole Northeast have gone under again last night?
We still, as a matter of fact, we still are tied in.
But there are checks and balances now.
Exactly. And as I understand it, those checks and balances did work. That was one of the points that the New Jersey official made to us today, was that this, in fact, even though it was a massive blackout, was isolated and kept confined to Manhattan or to the New York metropolitan area.
So the point I'm trying to make is that something indeed of value was learned from 65 with the checks and balances to prevent a whole area from going under.
The whole area certainly did not go under, and those checks worked last night.
And speaking of that, until around 9:30 last night, the question, where were you when the lights went out, was answered with remembrances of a dozen years ago. I remember that well. It was 5:27. Evening of the 9th day of November, a rather moonlit, balmy Tuesday for November, when the lights began to flicker in this newsroom, not only in the city of New York, but throughout the entire northeastern United States. Because of the earlier hour, however, earlier than last night's blackout by 4 hours, many thousands more people were trapped in subways and elevators. But that night in the fall of '65 earned a place in the legend that is New York. People were at their best, we recall, directing traffic, generally helping each other. And after the lights went on again, steps were taken so history would not repeat itself. Well, it came close, but not exactly. John?
Jim, despite Mayor Beam's warning that it would not be a normal day, scores of overly conscientious workers showed up to punch the time clock. Vic Miles found the time clocks weren't the only things not working.
Everything I do and touch, during the day is electric. And that without electricity, there's really no point in going anywhere.
Okay, maybe Con Ed couldn't have given us a bigger headache. But what's this? Looks like a Sunday, a holiday. Well, obviously you're not at work.
No, certainly not. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, but you're supposed to be at work today.
I don't think the elevator works.
Central Park bulged with sun worshippers who would normally be behind a desk. How come you're not at work today?
No transportation. The subway's not running.
Those who didn't want the park took to the water. Thousands of New Yorkers took Mayor Beam's advice, stayed away from the city's main line, and headed for the shores, or the pools, or just hung out near the house. Getting out of doors this fine day and enjoying the feeling of playing hooky from work was the rule for some.
I'm supposed to be at work, but with no electricity, no elevator, no air conditioning. Building's closed down, so here I am. It's terrific.
Tried to find out exactly how many New Yorkers let themselves be talked into not working today, but a lot of those who know took the mayor's advice too. There was no one at the hooky counter's desk either. Vic Miles for Channel 2 News.
And as we continue our coverage of the blackout of '77, we'll tell you what you can do to help avert a blood shortage, and just how did the newspapers in New York handle the blackout, and what happened on Broadway last night, when the 6 o'clock report continues. Minutes ago, if you were with us, you saw Vic Miles in a helicopter over Brooklyn. Now I'm told he is over the Bronx. Vic?
Yes, Jim, I am. And you know, the streets are deceptively quiet. It's almost like a quiet Sunday afternoon as far as traffic is concerned. But when you take a closer look, right about there, that's the results of last night's looting. Debris left behind, stuff dropped by people, stuff they don't want, and the ever-present police and firemen trying to make sure that the fire doesn't break out again or that everything stays under control. The situation in certain parts of the Bronx, Jim, this is just about what's going on. In fact, I have information that state troopers are supposed to be arriving soon out at Bronx Park. They're going to be coming out there to augment the police department. Now, I'm sure that the folks out here, and certainly the commercial people that we're looking at now, like that cleaners down below, hopes we don't have to go through another night like last night anytime soon. Jim?
Well, Vic, we're told the state troopers were to arrive in the city at approximately 6:30, so your information is correct as to their arriving in the Bronx. I don't know if you're aware that Bronx Borough President Bob Abrams made a comment this afternoon that the business situation of the Bronx is bad enough as it is, and now many more businesses have been driven out, and he really is worried about the economic well-being of what is left of the Bronx.
And well, he might be, Jim. I don't think this would encourage a small businessman to feel as if he can walk away and leave his property at night. Of course, we're not expecting to have a blackout every day either, but still, this is, it's really something.
Thank you, Vic. We'll be checking in with you later, perhaps. Now, businesses are the daily lifeline for the metropolitan area's 282 private and city hospitals' blood supply. With most of the offices shut down, today's normal collection of 1,600 pints of blood was canceled, thus putting a serious dent in the blood supply. A spokeswoman for the Greater New York Blood Program says refrigeration failures have also added to the overall problem. And so she has asked that you call this number, 794-3158. That's 794-3158 to find out where you can donate blood to avert an emergency. Please help if you can. John?
For some New York City businessmen, today's sunlight was almost unwelcome, for it showed the destruction that came with the dark, powerless night. J.J. Gonzalez reports.
It was a frustrating time for police. As soon as they'd leave one store to protect another, the looters would move right back in behind them to take what had not already been stolen.
What are you going to do with that? I'm going to use it. What else? Right? Do you know how long that store is there? No.
For the past several months.
Yeah, for the past several months?
Yes.
Right. You wouldn't want to leave that in there.
Somebody might steal it.
Why? Somebody might steal it?
That's right. I'm just securing it. I mean, they stole everything already. What is there to steal?
Some store owners returned during the night, but for many that was already too late. Others came back at daylight to find they had been virtually wiped out.
Mr. Rubin, exactly what are your losses here? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. They just wiped out the whole merchandise up there. I have no idea what it is yet.
Television sets and everything?
TV, hi-fi, air conditioners, everything.
Did you think these gates would prevent anyone from getting in?
No, you don't know what's what. I have no idea. They ripped off locks, they did everything.
How bad are your losses, sir?
I can't tell yet. I just got here a little while ago.
Right. Is anything left in that store?
Yeah, there's some stuff left, stuff that's not usable to anybody else. You know, we're primarily a parts store. There's very little consumer goods there, but whatever there was is gone.
Someone had driven a car up here last night and was protecting it in some way. Did that help something?
Yes, one of our assistant managers.
Right. He was pushing people away.
Yes. Actually, he got here after the looting had started. And protected the store, stayed all night, as a matter of fact.
During the looting, someone turned on a fire hydrant, a potentially dangerous act when there was a problem maintaining water pressure to fight fires in a city without power. For the neighborhood merchants, the problems were not just for today, but for the future as well.
We have insurance, and what it covers, I don't know.
Will you stay in business here?
I don't know. It all depends upon the insurance and whether I can afford it.
Are you going to continue in business in this area?
We were just talking about that. I don't know. I don't know.
But for one of the merchants who lives and does business on the Lower East Side, there was no choice. Ismael Rivera packed what was left of his sporting goods onto a truck. He wasn't planning to continue in business.
How much is...
And similar scenes were repeated in parts of Brooklyn, the South Bronx, and East Harlem. The looting followed what's become an almost classic pattern. First hit with the clothing stores, liquor stores, the jewelry shops. Electronic stores were next, with TVs and hi-fis. Last were the food stores and furniture stores. Some merchants protected their stores by driving cars onto the sidewalks, blocking the front of the store with the front of the car, turning on the car lights and sitting there night long with the lights turned on. John?
Thank you, J.J. We've been getting some calls that parts of the East Side in the 60s now have power, but Con Ed cannot confirm that for us yet. And we have had calls that power is out again in East New York sections of Brooklyn, that at 6:30. Also that power went out again in Richmond Hill in Queens. Once again, Con Ed has not confirmed those reports. We'll be checking them and bringing them to you when we get them. Most Broadway shows are planning to raise the curtain tonight, but last night many curtains fell early. One show which ran in its entirety last night was The Cherry Orchard at the Lincoln Center's Beaumont Theater. Now, in one scene of the Chekhov play, the lights are doused and the only light used is a candle. Well, the blackout happened during that scene. No one knew about the blackout until after that scene, and the stagehands loaded themselves with more candles until the final curtain. Jim?
And now to the newspapers. The Daily News published its Bulldog in 2-star editions just before the blackout hit. The News did get another edition out during the blackout with the story on page 1. It was printed out on Long Island. The New York Times has a later deadline and did not manage to get its early edition out. The Times, however, made up pages 1 and 2 at the offices of the Bergen Record over in Hackensack, New Jersey, and the special edition, perhaps a collector's item now, was printed at the Times plant in Carlstadt, New Jersey. The Post, however, was not able to publish a paper at all today. As we continue our coverage of the blackout of '77, our consumer editor John Stossel will have some tips on food spoilage because of the blackout. We'll also tell you how the phone company coped with this situation when the 6 o'clock report continues. Though out of necessity, most of our attention today was devoted to the blackout in the city of New York and Westchester County. There was, of course, other news happening elsewhere. North Korea gunned down a United States Army helicopter today, killing 3 crew members and capturing another. President Carter said the helicopter strayed over communist territory, that's north of the 38th parallel, by mistake, and he didn't want the incident to escalate into a confrontation. The North Koreans failed to show up for a meeting sought by the American-led United Nations Command. They proposed instead that discussions be held on Saturday. The New York State Court of Appeals today threw out a 2-year-old indictment charging Assembly Speaker Stanley Steingut with political fixing. The appeals court said the Brooklyn district attorney did not have the jurisdiction to bring the indictment in the first place. James Earl Ray is going to plead innocent tomorrow to an escape charge stemming from his June 10th Tennessee prison breakout. Ray is currently serving 99 years for the 1968 murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now back to the blackout, John.
Jim, one thing to look out for in this power emergency is food spoilage. Consumer editor John Stossel visited local merchants today, and he tells you how you can tell if your refrigerated food is safe.
I went to the meatpacking section on Manhattan's West Side expecting to find spoiling meat, but everything was pretty much under control.
The meat packers were keeping the meat in trucks, fueling the refrigeration units by idling the engines. Or they kept the meat in storage lockers, which will keep cool for a full day even without electricity, as long as they keep the door closed, which they did, except to let us in. And so no meat was sold. The workers played cards. Harder hit were the supermarkets. Many of the chain stores stayed closed. The owners of smaller stores showed up, throwing out what they had to, but some claimed their frozen food was still good, especially if it was kept in a closed case.
Everything is perfect, absolutely perfect.
It's cold.
Cold.
Still frozen.
Frozen stuff. My meat case, I might have a little problem. Some of the meat is turning dark. I'll have to watch it, repack it, see if I got any spoilage, and I'll just have to take my loss on it. It's not slimy yet.
If it feels slimy, it's bad. It's pretty dark looking.
Dark is nothing. Aged meat will get dark also. That doesn't mean it's bad. You can smell it too. Beautiful. Smell it. No odor.
Meat and fish are among the foods that spoil first. It's true what he says. If meat is slimy, it's bad. If it turns dark, that means nothing. But it's bad if it turns green. The FDA says if frozen meat still contains ice crystals, it can be refrozen without danger. If it's warm, don't refreeze, but you can still eat it safely if it's been warm less than 4 hours, as long as you cook it well done. Milk is easy to test. It doesn't become dangerous until after it becomes sour. So as long as milk tastes good, it's safe. Cheese will keep a long time, but cottage cheese will not. Thawed frozen vegetables can be refrozen. They may look shriveled and lose some of their taste, but they shouldn't hurt you. In general, refrigerated food will keep 1 full day in your house without current if you keep the door closed. The more food you have in the refrigerator, the longer it will keep. The packages help keep each other cold. Shopping will be a little scary for the next few days. Some storekeepers will throw questionable things away, but there's no way to be sure all of them will. Health inspectors are out checking, but there aren't enough of them. If you are suspicious of what someone is selling you, call 964-0812. That's the City Health Department, and your call will tip off an inspector. The number again is 964-0812. And calling them is probably safer than listening to the storekeeper when he says,
"It's okay."
It's okay?
Of course it is. It's just the top here that's really gloppy. It stayed cold underneath.
Okay. So you're going to sell it?
I'm not saying that.
Though he still sold me some, and I still ate it.
Though I would not have eaten it had it been a prepared food, like one of these, chicken salad or custard or whatever. These spoil faster than any other food, and you should avoid eating them if you aren't sure they've been kept cold. If they were spoiled, the symptoms of food poisoning, nausea and stomach aches, would appear 1 to 2 hours after you ate. If you were poisoned by meat, the symptoms would not appear until at least 4 hours, maybe 24 hours after you ate. Jim?
Well, just when it appeared things were starting to improve somewhat, we've been informed that things are worsening a little bit in some parts. Con Ed says a major power failure has now hit parts of Queens and Brooklyn, areas that had the power on totally just a short time ago. Con Ed explains that 3 of the 5 feeder cables to that area have failed. Major areas include Crown Heights, Ridgewood, and Richmond Hill. Other areas affected include Howard Beach and Ozone Park in Queens. To repeat, more power failures in parts of Queens and Brooklyn. Just a short time ago, all their power was back on. Should point this out to you, that if you left your air conditioner in the on position or any other major appliance in the on position when the blackout hit, be advised to turn them in the off position. For to leave them in the on position, when full power is restored, it's too much of a load. It can kick the whole system off. So if you find any of your major appliances in the on position in your current blackout situation, turn them off. Now, the telephone company maintains service throughout the darkness using diesel generators and batteries. The volume of calls has been enormous. Ma Bell estimating 80 million calls were made in New York City in a 24-hour period, which included the dark hours. On a busy business day, 36 million calls is averaged. The police emergency number 911 received 45,000 calls during the first 8 hours of the blackout. Usually, 16,000 call that number in a 24-hour period. I should also point out you could not get information from the phone company since they have to dial into a computer which is controlled electronically, so there was no information. John?
Jim, as we continue our coverage of Blackout of 77, we'll run down just where power has been restored, where it has not been restored. Arnold Diaz will tell us about the first Manhattan neighborhood that got its lights back this morning, and Joe Whitty will have the weather, all that when the 6 o'clock report continues. Vic Miles has been up in a helicopter with our live camera. He is now still up in that helicopter, and he has a report on what's going on over the city of New York at this moment. Vic.
Thank you, John. A few moments ago, I was in the Bronx, and we had, well, evidence that some looting had taken place last night, obviously. Now, we're back in Brooklyn, in the Bushwick section. This fire is on Bushwick and Penn Avenue. There's an entire building engulfed in flame, and the flames, the sparks are jumping onto other buildings nearby. Firemen, all they can do is wet down nearby buildings. They were even wetting down the cars just a few moments before we went on the air with this report, trying to keep things cool. People appear to be evacuating nearby buildings. Now, this is the kind of stuff, the kind of mischief that firemen, well, they just agonize over. Apparently, it was an abandoned factory building, and it went up, well, between the time it took us to leave Brooklyn, go to the Bronx, and come back by helicopter at over 100 miles an hour. And look at it now. Absolutely, totally engulfed. Firemen are just spraying around the edges, trying to keep the rest of the thing cool. Crowds are being kept well back, but that thing's gone. That building's gone. And that's the way things have been here in Brooklyn. There's one, I can count, a couple, 3 plumes of smoke, but this is certainly the worst, right here on Bushwick and Penn Avenue. Earlier, there were fires on Schenectady Avenue and Union Street. That was in the Brownsville area. Then at Rutland Street, there was looting. A factory building went up at East New York section while we were on the air earlier. Now this at Bushwick and Penn Avenue. Well, the story's down there. You can see it easy enough. Jim?
Yes, we can, Vic. Thank you very much. Now to update the latest in the power situation, parts of Brooklyn and Queens just suffered another power failure affecting Crown Heights, Ridgewood, Richmond Hill, Howard Beach, and Ozone Park. The Bronx is 60% restored. Manhattan is now 50% restored. Con Ed says the east side, south of Yorkville, including the Silk Stocking District, Gramercy Park, the Lower East Side, and Wall Street. Power is still not back in the west side communities of Chelsea, Greenwich Village, and Soho. Con Ed says power has been restored to more than 2 million of the 2.8 million residents of Westchester and New York City. The utility says that all of Westchester and Staten Island have been restored to full power. Now, I have this regarding the blackout, which just came to me. Governor Carey says now he has no plans to place the New York State National Guard on alert because of the New York City blackout. Mayor Beam, as you recall, had asked that the Guard be placed on alert. In a telephone interview this evening, Governor Carey said using the Guard or federal troops in the city would only be a last resort if city police became unable to handle the situation. Carey went on to say that at this time he believes city police and other city agencies have control of the situation. He says placing the Guard on alert and calling National Guardsmen into armories could be counterproductive because some of the Guardsmen are city police officers and firemen who would then be pulled off their regular duties in the city. The governor noted, too, that National Guard equipment already is being used in the city, including electrical generators for city hospitals. To repeat again, Governor Carey says he will not put the Guard on alert, and we were informed a little short time ago that the state troopers, 250 of them, were due to arrive in the city at 6:30, and that was 25 minutes ago. We've had no further word since then. New York City's subway system went back into action at 5:50 this evening. The subway's revved up with limited service. The MTA says it expects to resume normal post-rush hour schedules at 7:30 this evening. An MTA spokesman said earlier today that both the IRT and the BMT lines would be fairly complete, but the E-train on the I&D line would operate only between 179th Street and Jamaica to Eli Avenue, making local stops. However, some of the renewed failures that have just occurred might slow subway service resumption. Now, I have another report just in. The Long Island Railroad says service is being temporarily suspended now between Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn and Jamaica, Queens, because of the new power problems. Service is, however, continuing on a limited basis on Long Island Railroad trains from Manhattan's Penn Station. So the new power outages are causing further complications. Now, Bob Halloran, well, we gave him the day off today. He certainly deserved it on the blackout. He can go to the beach or do whatever he pleases. Joe Woody, however, does not have the day off. And Joe, hopefully, we do not have any of those severe thunderstorms in the area as we did last night.
No, that is not going to be our problem, Jim. But our problem, I think, as we can see now with more power outages, is that people are going to have to get together. All New Yorkers are going to have to get together because we cannot use air conditioning any more than absolutely necessary, because this is the pattern that I see setting up for the weekend. Muggy tropical air over the Atlantic seaboard, including us, temperatures in the 90s. That cooler air with some relieving showers is going to stay to our west, so we just have to slow down, drink plenty of water, and take it easy because we've got a good 3 days of hot, sticky weather. Jim?
For most of the people of New York City, the first light that was available today was the light of the sun, a hot one. But soon after daybreak, power started to come back on in scattered neighborhoods. Arnold Diaz visited the first part of Manhattan to get electricity back.
If you lived on East 78th Street, you were still without power at 7:30 this morning, but not if you lived on 77th Street. From there down to East 62nd, the power came back on in the early morning, the first place with electricity in Manhattan.
And for the lucky businesses, like one of the only gas stations in this area that got their power on first, they're doing some kind of business.
It hit the fan. Yeah. Like, look at that. This is like what we had a couple of months back. Or I guess a year or two ago, the gas crisis. I don't know.
The grocery store was quickly selling out of dairy products, and the hardware store was doing a good business.
What do people seem to be coming in and buying?
The transistor batteries and candles. They're afraid it's going to happen again. And a few flashlights that we have left.
But a liquor store open at 8 a.m.? Why not, said the owner.
You think you're going to do much business at 8 in the morning?
Oh, yeah, some people. When people are in trouble, they usually drink.
Yeah. Is that why you're open so early?
No, just because I couldn't sleep, so I came down.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he was doing business.
Some Yago.
Yeah.
And some Teddy Saw.
Is that right?
Right.
You're having a party at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Well, what else is there? You know, you can't go out in the streets. It's not safe.
So whether you were a merchant in need of business, a resident looking for a quart of milk, a gallon of gasoline, or a pint of vodka, the place to be this morning was the Upper East Side, where the power was. Jim?
And that is the 6 o'clock report. I'm Jim Jenson.
And I'm John Tesh, sitting in for Rollin Smith. Jim and Dave Marish will be back in the newsroom at 11 o'clock tonight. Of course, we will all be here between now and then to bring you the latest developments on Blackout 77. Stay with us. If we hear anything, you will hear it.
Coming up, the CBS Evening News, Walter Cronkite. We'll be back tomorrow evening at 6.
It wasn't until 10:39 p.m. on July 14th that the entire city's power was back online. During the blackout, CBS 2 managed to stay on the air thanks to gas and diesel-fueled generators, resuming broadcast only 25 minutes after power was lost. The city has had 2 other major blackouts since, one in 2003 that was part of a widespread power outage across the Northeast, Midwest, and Canada. Just 3 years ago, the west side of Manhattan was plunged into darkness on the 42nd anniversary of the 1977 blackout.